Allahu Akbar, dear friends. God is most glorious. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program sponsored by the Spiritual Assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb County and Sandy Springs, Georgia. So wonderful to have all of you with us today. You know, across the globe, the teachings of the Baha'i faith brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, and whose name in Arabic means the glory of God. His teachings have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service with work performed in the spirit of service, actually being accounted as worship in the eyes of God, the fundamental equality of the sexes more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity, the harmony between religion and science as an established fact, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that strive to bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Friends, we've been having wonderful programs every week, and today will be no different. We're pleased to have you all with us. And again, welcome. We'll begin with opening devotions. Please mute yourselves if you're not speaking, and silence your electronic devices if you are. Thank you. Elizabeth?
It's blurred. Can you unblur it?
She's restarting it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I adjure thee by thy might, O my God. Let no harm beset me in times of tests, and in moments of heedlessness, guide my steps aright through thine inspiration. Thou art God, potent art thou to do what thou desirest. No one can withstand thy will or thwart thy purpose above.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Stephen?
My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts, both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all-bountiful, the overflowing shadows of whose mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendors of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy hath bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit hath circled, we beseech thee, entreating thy ancient grace, and seeking thy present favor, that thou mayest have mercy upon all who are the manifestations of the world of being, and deny them not the outpourings of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou, verily, art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful.
Thank you, Stephen. Sally?
Glorified art thou, O Lord my God. I implore thee by the onrushing winds of thy grace, and by them who are the day springs of thy purpose and the dawning places of thine inspiration, to send down upon me and upon all that have sought thy face that which beseemeth thy generosity and bountiful grace, and is worthy of thy bestowals and favors. Poor and desolate I am, O my Lord. Immerse me in the ocean of thy wealth. Athirst, suffer me to drink from the living waters of thy loving kindness. I beseech thee by thine own self, and by him whom thou hast appointed as the manifestation of thine own being, and thy discriminating word unto all that are in heaven and on earth, to gather together thy servants beneath the shade of the tree of thy gracious providence. Help them then to partake of its fruits, to incline their ears to the rustling of its leaves, and to the sweetness of the voice of the bird that chanteth upon its branches. Thou art verily the help in peril, the inaccessible, the almighty, the most bountiful.
Thank you, Sally. Bill?
My God, whom I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gifts, both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all bountiful, the overflowing showers of whose mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendors of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the quintessence of mercy hath bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit hath circled, we beseech thee, entreating thine ancient grace, and seeking thy present favor, that thou mayest have mercy upon all who are the manifestations of the world of being, and deny them not the outpourings of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, the all-powerful. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Bill. Ting Ting?
My God, who I worship and adore, I bear witness unto thy unity and thy oneness, and acknowledge thy gift both in the past and in the present. Thou art the all bountiful, the overflowing showers of whose mercy have rained down upon high and low alike, and the splendor of whose grace have been shed over both the obedient and the rebellious. O God of mercy, before whose door the acquaintances of mercy has bowed down, and round the sanctuary of whose cause loving kindness in its inmost spirit has circled, we beseech thee, entreating thy ancient grace, and seeking thy present favor, that thou may have mercy upon all who are the in manifestation of the world of being, and deny them not the outpouring of thy grace in thy days. All are but poor and needy, and thou verily art the all-possessing, the all-subduing, and the all-powerful. Baha'u'llah.
Thank you, Ting. Yasmin?
Hmm. Oh my, I cannot really see this. Can somebody else read it? I can't really see that.
Elizabeth?
Oh my God, Verily, I invoke thee and supplicate thee before thy threshold, asking thee that all thy mercies may descend upon these souls. Specialize them for thy favor and thy truth. O Lord, unite and bind together the hearts, join in accord all the souls, and exhilarate the spirits through the signs of thy sanctity and oneness. O Lord, make these faces radiant through the light of thy oneness. Strengthen the loins of thy servants in the service of thy kingdom. O Lord, thou possessor of infinite mercy, O Lord of forgiveness and pardon, forgive our sins, pardon our shortcomings, and cause us to turn to the kingdom of thy clemency, invoking the kingdom of might and power, humble at thy shrine, and submissive before the glory of thine evidences. O Lord God, make us as waves of the sea, as flowers of the garden, united, agreed through the bounties of thy love. O Lord, dilate the breasts through the signs of thy wonders, and make all mankind as stars shining from the same height of glory, as perfect fruits growing upon thy tree of life. Verily, thou art the Almighty, the self-subsisting, the giver, the forgiving, the pardoner, the omniscient, the one creator, Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Stephen.
It is better to guide one soul than to possess all that is on earth. For as long as that guided soul is under the shadow of the tree of divine unity, he and the one who hath guided him will both be recipients of God's tender mercy, whereas possession of earthly things will cease at the time of death. The path to guidance is one of love and compassion, not of force and coercion. This hath been God's method in the past, and shall continue to be it in the future. He causeth him whom he pleaseth to enter the shadow of his mercy. Verily, he is a supreme protector, the all-generous. There is no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in his day, to hear his verses and believe in them, to attain his presence, which is naught but the presence of God, to sail upon the sea of the heavenly kingdom of his good pleasure, and to partake of the choice fruits of the paradise of his divine oneness.
Thank you, Stephen. Sally.
This is the day in which the testimony of the Lord hath been fulfilled, the day in which the word of God hath been made manifest, and his evidence firmly established. His voice is calling you unto that which shall profit you, and enjoineth you to observe that which shall draw you nigh unto God, the Lord of revelation.
Thank you, Sally. Bill.
Be thou not sad and dispirited on account of the opposition of the heedless ones. Soon they shall regret sorely. Reflect thou how the Pharisees persecuted and looked down in contempt upon his holiness the Christ. The result was that his lamp became ignited, his light began to shine, and his followers sparkled like unto the stars from the horizon of existence. And the consequence to the Pharisees was the pangs of remorse and regrets. Abdul Baha.
Thank you, Bill. Ding.
The creative energies mysteriously generated by the first stirring of the embryonic world order of Baha'u'llah have as soon as released within a national destined to become its cradle and champion. Endowed that nation with their worthiness and invested with the powers and capacities and equipped it spiritually to play the part foreshadowed in these prophetic words. Their potencies, which this God-given mission has infused into its people are, on the one hand, beginning to be manifested through the conscious efforts and the nationwide accomplishments in both the teaching and administrative sphere of Baha'i activity, of the organized community of the followers of Baha'u'llah in the North America continent. These same potencies, apart from yet collateral with these efforts and accomplishments, are on the other hand, intensively shaping under the impact of the world political and economic forces, the destiny of that nation, and are influencing the lives and actions of both its government and its people. Shulk Effendi, The Advent of Divine Justice.
Thank you, Ding. Friends, it's time for the healing prayer. And if any of you wish to remember a loved one through the prayer for healing, please feel free to call out their name at this time. Josie Reynolds.
Elon Bowers, Deborah Mabley,
Richard Harper, Felicia Alexander,
Elizabeth Bowen,
Stacy Simmons,
Thy name is my healing. We're doing a song written in 1830 something.
1834.
Really?
No.
You know that?
Yeah.
And but made famous by Mississippi John Hurt in
46.
No,
43.
I'll do. Okay.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, Lord. Burden down, Lord, since I laid my burden down, Lord. Burden down, Lord, since I laid my burden down. I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burden down, I feel better, so much better. Since I laid my burden down, glory, 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 hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, since I laid my burden down, oh, since I laid my burden down, since I laid my burden down.
Beautiful. I love that video. Okay, friends. Every week we're blessed to have a guest presenter to come and share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week, we're honored to have with us Jean Unterschutz, one half of the dynamic spiritual duo of Jean and Phyllis Unterschutz. Both are passionate about not only calling out racial injustice where it lies, but have for years been proactively championing racial healing, going so far as to form an organization, the Race Story Rewrite Project, with their friend and beloved cohort, Todd Ewing, the sole purpose of which was to, and I quote, facilitate capacity building for individuals and organizations committed to racial prejudice, to eliminating racial prejudice, and to creating a racially just and unified society. Together, Jean and Phyllis also co-wrote their wonderful book entitled Longing, Stories of Racial Healing, which contains multiple accounts of Jean and Phyllis's purposeful journey of discovery through the world of racial healing. This morning, Jean is going to share one of the stories in the book entitled Body Language. The story is about the time Jean went to an event to meet Ralph Ellison, an African-American novelist and the author of Invisible Man. Although the story has many humorous moments, it should give rise to many insights folks can share about the challenges racial conditioning presents to community building. So friends, please welcome Jean Unterschutz. Unmute.
Yes, unmute. Thank you, Hermione, for that wonderful introduction. When I was contacted, it said send a brief bio, and I sent like about 5 lines, but you expanded. That was just wonderful. Thank you.
Actually, I never saw it. I wrote my own bio.
So yeah, my wife Phyllis and I decided at some point in like 1996, after a very inspiring conference. So first, I want to ascertain: are there any folks here who are not Baha'is, who are seekers, friends of the faith? So okay, so everybody is Baha'i, correct? Yes. Okay.
As we know.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. So that just, I don't have to explain a lot of things. Okay. That's why I'm asking. So we were at a conference, and I don't know if any of you know Jack McCants, but he was one of the speakers there. Yes. Very inspiring. He was a minister before he became a Baha'i. And so it was the beginning of the 4-year plan. And he said, consider the next 4 years the most important years of your life. Be audacious. So we left that conference and we're like, be audacious. Somehow he cast a magic spell on us. We're like, be audacious. Consider the next 4 years the most important years of our life. We took it to heart. So we don't know who decided this, but one of us said, why don't buy a trailer, sell our house, and start traveling around the country and visiting Baha'i communities? So we did that. Within a year, we had our house on the market. We had purchased a little trailer, and we set off. And after the visit to our second Baha'i community, we decided to focus on racial healing, racial justice. So I won't go into that. I don't have time to really go into a lot of details about that. But what happened is that as we started traveling around, we just brought that topic up. So what do you guys think about what Shoghi Effendi says, about let the white, what the white folks are supposed to do, what Black folks are supposed to do, and would generate a conversation around race. And so what we also were discovering, because we had lived in a pretty white Baha'i community, so we didn't have, even though we had a lot of head knowledge, I had gone through a lot of training and so forth, we didn't really have close relationships, close cross-racial relationships. So after feasts and holy day meetings and so forth, everybody went back to their homes, which were in different communities with different life experiences and so forth. So when we started traveling, we started meeting people up close and personal, and people were sharing their stories with us. And so we heard about the damage. Racism wasn't just an intellectual concept. It was something that was causing serious damage to the lives of our fellow believers and friends. And so we took it to heart. But as a result of these more intimate relationships, we start discovering our own racial conditioning as white folks from the Midwest. And that was very disturbing. We thought we knew something. I thought I knew something about race because I've been through all this training and everything. But when it comes to applying what you think you know, it's a whole different experience. And so things came out of my mouth that insulted people and caused distance, and people's eyes glassed over when I said something. So we had to learn how to repair relationships, and what was involved in creating sustainable cross-racial relationships. And it's particularly important for us as Baha'is who have embraced this teaching of the oneness of humanity. And I was writing down some thoughts this morning. People ask us, what's the Baha'i faith? Well, Baha'i faith is all about the oneness of humanity. It's the pivotal teaching. We got real excited, but actually applying that principle of the oneness of humanity in the community building process results in a lot of frustration and emotional pain for us if we're really honest with ourselves. And so what do we do about that? So we're still working on that. I just wanted to start by reading one paragraph from Shoghi Effendi, because the oneness of humankind is not established just because we believe in that. It's because we believe in Baha'u'llah and his revelation, and we believe that he's the manifestation of God for this day. And so we believe the oneness of humanity. Our work is just beginning at that point. It hasn't ended. We've reached a certain level of understanding, but then for the rest of our lives, we're committed to making that a reality in our relationships with one another, with our institutions, and with our community. So I just wanted to read this one passage from Shoghi Effendi that just refers to the depth of that concept or that principle of the oneness of humanity. Shoghi Effendi says, "Let there be no mistake. The principle of the oneness of mankind, the pivot around which all the teachings of Baha'u'llah revolve, is no mere outburst of ignorant emotionalism or an expression of vague and pious hope. Its appeal is not to be merely identified with a reawakening of the spirit of brotherhood and goodwill among men, nor does it aim solely at the fostering of harmonious cooperation among individual peoples and nations. Its implications are deeper, its claims greater than any which the prophets of old were allowed to advance. Its message is applicable not only to the individual, but concerns itself primarily with the nature of those essential relationships that must bind all the states and nations as members of one human family. It does not constitute merely the enunciation of an ideal, but stands inseparably associated with an institution adequate to embody its truth, demonstrate its validity, and perpetuate its influence. It implies an organic change in the structure of present-day society, a change such as the world has not yet experienced." So that's what's underlying, that's the depth. Well, we don't really understand the depth, but it alludes to the depth of the oneness of mankind. So, but basically, as individuals, we're just living our lives. And the first thing that's important for us is our individual cross-racial relationships. That's like a big part of the work that we're called upon to do in this particular phase of growth. So we're just starting this whole thing, So the story I'm going to read is called Body Language. And so this is, I chose this story. I've only read this story like 2 or 3 other times publicly. And I really like this story because it doesn't have a lot of typical racial drama in it. It's kind of subtle. And I hope you listen to it with that in mind. It's got some lightness to it. So if you feel like chuckling or laughing, go right ahead. It's not that heavy, but it is that heavy. And so we'll get to that toward the end. So what I'm going to present, I'm going to read the story, and then it's followed by a commentary. And then after the commentary, then we can talk about, what you guys got from it, what insights, what thoughts, what feelings you got. I hope my voice is okay. I'm struggling with some allergies, so I may be clearing my throat from time to time. This happened in 2002 in Tennessee. Body language. Is my volume and everything okay? Okay, I see nodding heads. I jumped out of the car, dashed into the trailer, and turned on the television. My favorite show was about to start, and as the picture came into focus, the 5:30 newscast was just ending. I noticed a community service announcement that was briefly displayed on the screen. Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison, Tuesday, 7 p.m., City Bookstore. Then it was gone. I wanted more information, but the news anchors were already smiling and bidding the viewers a good evening. So I jotted the information on the calendar and sat down to watch my show.
The following Tuesday, I was excited about the event at the bookstore. At 6 o'clock, I called and asked the person who answered the phone, "Could you give me information about the event tonight with Ralph Ellison, author of Invisible Man?" I just started my shift," he said, "and don't know what's scheduled this evening. Hold on and I'll find out." A couple of minutes later, the man reported, "Yes, that's happening tonight at 7 o'clock. Ah, great. Uh, let's see, I just turned it. Will he be reading from his book? Is Mr. Ellison a former resident of this city?" I asked. "I really don't know anything about it," he said. 40 minutes later, I was on my way to meet Ralph Ellison. I dimly remembered reading Invisible Man at some point in my education, and I knew Ralph Ellison was African American, a literary giant of the 20th century. Because his appearance at the bookstore occurred during our brief visit to this city, I was going to meet him. I brought a notebook. This was history. During the drive, I chided myself for running late. I worried that the parking lot would be full and that seating and possibly standing room inside the bookstore would be unavailable. I pressed harder on the gas pedal. When I arrived, the lot was nearly empty. I had anticipated balloons and big signs welcoming Mr. Ellison, but there was no indication that an event of such import was taking place. Inside, there was no throng. In fact, there were very few people. I walked to the information desk and inquired about the program. "Oh," said the clerk, gesturing indifferently to the furthermost corner of the store. "That's back there in the corner." What? In a corner? How could they put Ralph Ellison back in a corner? As I hurried to the area set aside for the event, each disinterested customer I passed only served to increase my annoyance. And everyone was white. Where were the African American citizens of the city? Wasn't Black literature taught in public school? When I made my way around the last of the tall bookshelves, which seemed like walls set up to isolate Mr. Ellison's reading from the rest of the bookstore activities, I stood dumbfounded in front of those who had gathered. Before me was a long wooden table, around which were seated 6 white people, 2 men and 4 women. Ralph Ellison was not there. I'm glad I didn't miss anything, I thought. He's late. Maybe his flight was delayed. At one end of the table were 2 empty chairs. I sat in one of them and realized, oh man, when he gets here, he'll sit right next to me. The man to my left suggested that we all introduce ourselves. After introductions, we waited in silence. A couple of minutes later, he said, maybe we should get started. What? Get started with what? I thought. Taken aback by the suggestion to start without our guest, I retreated to a daydream and fantasized about meeting Ralph Ellison. I peered through a gap in the wall of books to catch sight of him as he approached our little corner of the world to share a slice of reality I was hungry for. In my reverie, I saw him, unruffled and smiling, as he came around the barricade of shelving and stood before us. He walked over to the chair next to me, set a worn leather satchel on the tabletop, and greeted us. Now I was ready to get started. My vision evaporated when the guy on my left said, I've read Invisible Man many times. To make his point, he held up his dog-eared copy. As some of you know, I'm a retired literature teacher. These folks know each other, I thought. So what were your impressions of this book, he asked, waving the beat-up paperback. Everyone had a book except me. Well, I really liked the Battle Royal, said the other man. It was really interesting. His contribution was followed by silence. How about the rest of you, the teacher asked. I liked his writing style, said a woman at the far end of the table. Ah, great, said the teacher. You know, he incorporates a lot of surrealism in his writing. Did any of you notice that? Silence. How about symbolism, the teacher asked, coaxing the group to respond. Symbolism was a literary concept that seemed more accessible to the folks gathered around the table. Each of them had a contribution to make about his or her favorite symbol in the book. I thought, This is crazy. Why don't we just wait for Mr. Ellison to get here? He'll answer all of our questions about surrealism and symbolism. And all of a sudden it hit me. Ralph Ellison, esteemed literary giant of the 20th century, was not coming to the bookstore this evening. I glanced around at the 6 white people. This was a book review group. Suddenly, my desire to sit at the head of the table waned. As the discussion continued, I felt frustrated because I didn't recognize any passages that were cited from the book. I was beginning to doubt I had ever read it. Did I really know who Ralph Ellison was? He was African American, wasn't he? I thought Invisible Man addressed the challenge of being Black in America. Have I somehow gotten it wrong? The group had been talking about Invisible Man for over half an hour, and I had not heard one reference to the protagonist or any other character in the book that identified them as Black. The word Black seemed irrelevant or taboo. I was just about to confess my ignorance, excuse myself, and go home when the woman at the far end of the table suggested, maybe he was treated that way because he was Black. Everyone turned and looked at her. I leaned forward in my chair. I mean, life wasn't easy for them in the 50s, she said. Hallelujah. Now I felt I could contribute something. Do you think the patterns of racial prejudice that were common in the 50s have changed since then? Or have they been perpetuated into the present? I asked. Now everyone turned and looked at me. Well, in some ways, things are a lot better for African Americans today, offered one of the other women at the table. Yeah, but some things are still tough for them, like racial profiling, another woman added. Our conversation now focused on the race issue in the United States, and several references were made to the stylistic way in which the author wrote about racism. The teacher was clearly not comfortable with the direction our book review had taken. What do you think is the meaning behind the title Invisible Man? He asked, in an effort to get us back on the symbolic track. I know, I answered, in a counter effort to keep the conversation focused on the content of the book. The teacher looked annoyed, but the other seemed interested, so I continued. The protagonist in the book isn't literally invisible. The title is a symbol. I paused and smiled at the teacher. That expresses how a Black man feels white America treats him. Like he's invisible, I said, nodding at the empty chair next to me. I'll give you an example. I told them about an African American man I had met at an event in the city about a year earlier. Phyllis and I had arranged to meet him at a local restaurant the following week. An hour into our dinner conversation, he grew quiet, reflective, apparently picking his next words carefully. Finally, he said, you know, I can always tell who lives here and who doesn't. How? I asked. When I'm walking downtown in the middle of the day, mind you, with pedestrians everywhere, I make an effort to look others in the eye and say good morning or give some kind of greeting. The only white people who respond are obviously tourists. Other white folks, those who live here, just look through me like I don't exist, like I'm invisible. This real life story elicited empathy, especially from the women. We started talking about how we relate to one another, white to Black, and how we need to learn skills that will improve understanding and cooperation. Suddenly, the other man in the group, the one who liked the battle royal, declared, it's all about body language. I let out an involuntary, huh? Let me tell you what I mean, he said. Last year, I picked up my son from school to bring him home for the holidays. We had to drive through a big city on the East Coast, and somehow I took a wrong turn and we got lost. Next thing I knew, we were in the... He hesitated and looked at the 6 of us sitting around the table, then continued, well, we were in what people call the ghetto. You know, the inner city where Blacks live mostly. Anyhow, my son got really nervous, said we were in a high crime area and had to get out quick. I told him I had no idea how to get out, that I had to stop somewhere and ask for directions. He pleaded with me to just keep driving, but I told him I had no choice. I didn't have a clue which way to drive. So eventually I saw a convenience store and parked. The man continued. Don't worry, I told my son. You just got to have the right body language. Watch what I do. My son followed me into the store. We were the only white people in there. Everyone else was black, African American. I walked up to the counter, told the guy there that we were lost, and asked him for directions back to the freeway. I just kept calm, like everything was all right. And I had the right body language that communicated I wasn't afraid, that I could take care of myself. As the man said this, he rocked back and forth in his chair with a sort of sitting swagger. The guy was real friendly, though. He gave us directions and we left. Nothing happened to us. We got in our car, found the expressway, and drove home. The man thrust out his arms, hands up, hands extended, palms up. Body language, he exclaimed, as if he were concluding a motivational talk. It's all about body language. All right, said the teacher, we should probably wrap things up for tonight. Thanks for coming, everyone, and feel free to join us next month, he said to me. We'll be discussing The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I thanked him for the invitation, but doubted I would come back to the next book review. I was pretty sure Victor Hugo wouldn't be there. That's the end of the story. So now I'm going to read the commentary, which is not super long, but I think it'll put a lot of things in perspective. This is a quote from Invisible Man. I am an invisible man. I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I am a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids. I might even be said to possess a mind. I am invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. End of quote. By the time I attended the book review group, Phyllis and I had already met many African Americans who told us about the racial challenges they face. Everything I shared at the meeting, I learned from them. I went to the bookstore to meet Ralph Ellison, and when I realized he was not going to show up, my first impulse was to leave. But I lingered, hoping there would be an opportunity to discuss a topic often met with discomfort or indifference in white circles. African American friends have asked me to always speak up when other whites are unaware of racial issues. You're white, they'll listen to you, these friends have said. I've considered the request a personal mandate, but it isn't always easy to carry out. I am white, and while I continue to wrestle with my own racial conditioning, I feel I have the responsibility to talk with other white people about our role in mending the rip that racism has caused in the social fabric of our communities. Tact is required and compassion. I'm not always successful. But on the night of the book review, I felt some of the folks were open to talking about race and to hearing my thoughts. I offered what I could at that point in my own developing awareness. We learned that the city in which the story takes place was split after slavery ended. The absence of industry based on the farming of cotton, tobacco, or peanuts meant that there were fewer field workers in antebellum times. Because geography in this area made land unsuitable for crops, most slaves had domestic jobs that required some degree of education. Instead of laboring in fields, they learned lessons that prepared them to earn wages as tradespeople and professionals after slavery was abolished. Although blacks and whites had worked together for generations, when slavery ended, each group went its separate way. The result was two thriving business communities, one black, one white. Black citizens created a social and economic structure in which the educational, medical, and financial needs of the Black community were met without dependence on whites. We also learned that in time, whites got irritated seeing people they had regarded as property now independent and successful. Whites still had the upper hand economically and politically, and evidently it did not occur to white businessmen and politicians that a golden opportunity had emerged to collaborate and tap into the real potential of the Black community. Instead, as has been the case in cities and towns across the country, whites used the power that comes with controlling resources to reestablish a dependency relationship. The separation, both physical and psychological, between Black and white apparently became so entrenched that some outsiders we spoke to have a palpable feeling of it when they visit the city. It's not just that Black folks aren't acknowledged and greeted in public. Their contributions as fellow citizens remain invisible. In many cities, the invisibility of African Americans can extend to entire neighborhoods. The man who shared with me his experience of feeling invisible in broad daylight was hesitant when Phyllis and I offered him a ride home after dinner. He said he was concerned about our comfort, but we assured him that we would be okay. On the way to his apartment, we drove under a freeway viaduct, a boundary separating two realities, into his neighborhood, an area isolated by surrounding industry. There were no streetlights, and the darkness was relieved only by lighted doorways and windows, which generated an eerie glow. The car's headlights exposed vacant lots littered with debris. Adults and children were still outside socializing at 11 o'clock at night. Our acquaintance was apologetic. "This is a place the city has forgotten," he said. "Nobody on the outside knows what goes on here. Even the police don't come in." Such conditions are evidence of an intractable social problem that cannot be solved by simply assuming the right body language, a tactic that might reasonably be used in some situations to protect oneself. What will it take then to find and implement a realistic and effective solution? Maybe the first step should be to acknowledge one another with a greeting and body language that reveals our longing to see the reflection of God's image in everybody's face. The Baha'i writings offered the following guidance. Thus should it be among the children of men. The diversity in the human family should be the cause of love and harmony, as it is in music where many different notes blend together in the making of a perfect chord. If you meet those of different race and color from yourself, do not mistrust them and withdraw yourself into your shell of conventionality, but rather be glad and show them kindness. Think of them as different colored roses growing in the beautiful garden of humanity, and rejoice to be among them. What happens after we take the first step? We won't really know until we stand up and start moving. There are choices to be made at every stage of the journey, and our strength increases when we practice the principle of unity and diversity in real life situations. By mastering the skills developed in taking the first step, we'll strengthen the spiritual muscles needed to take step 2, and then step 3. And eventually we will be making unimpeded progress and wondering why we were stationary in the first place. That's a commentary. I welcome any thoughts, insights that you all have.
Thank you for sharing all that, Mr. Gene. I really connected
I
with.
see Matthew's box lit up, but I don't know if you're trying to. Hi, Matthew. I don't know if you're trying to say something, but I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Are you unable to hear him, Gene?
And everybody's muted. I can't hear you, Hermione.
You can't hear me?
I know it's wrong. My speaker went off.
Okay.
I have an external speaker went off while I was talking. Okay.
Matthew had a comment, and then after him is Gwen. She had raised her hand.
Okay, cool.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's loud and clear.
Okay. I just wanted to thank you for sharing your insights. And it's amazing that you got to meet Mr. Ralph Ellison. And I think it's really potent that you pointed out uh, the body language of knowing like how to take care of yourself. You know, like I've learned that uh, being in Atlanta, and I wasn't raised, maybe as by a black family. I was raised in a white family, and I it's like sometimes I don't know how to take care of myself, but I act as though I do, and it's like I can connect with black people in that way. But it's yeah, I really, and thank you. That's all I can think of to say.
Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate your comments.
Gwen?
I didn't really raise my hand. I was just doing this.
Oh,
but
okay.
it's okay. I thought it was very interesting, and one thing that I have learned over the years of having the humble joy of being in the presence of so many African Americans and being married to one, and of course Caswell too. That one of the things I've learned how to do that I think is important is not only body language, but I need to be quiet. And recently we had the joy, because we just moved back to the South, we had the joy of driving to Louisiana to see Ernest's family that many he hadn't seen in over 35 years. Because he had been in California for 55 years. So some of these people weren't even born when he left. And so it was wonderful to meet them, but I was the only white person amongst all these wonderful family members. And again, I had to watch my body language and also be quiet and observe and listen. Occasionally, because they didn't know me, and of course they don't know what my principles as a Baha'i are, because none of them were Baha'is, that occasionally some of the relatives would talk past me. I was invisible. And I've had that situation a few times before, and so I understood that. But I also realized that I can participate in that conversation, even though I'm invisible, if I have something important to say. So although I try to be quiet, if I can contribute something that's meaningful or that's unifying or whatever, I will jump in and say something, and all of a sudden I wasn't invisible anymore. So they're wonderful lessons, Jean, to learn over time and circumstances and history. And I think we all have a long way to go, but it's like that pebble in the water. You make one move, and that that wave goes out, and hopefully it'll reach and help other people. So thank you for letting me speak. I wasn't going to, but thanks, Hermione.
Thank you, Gwen.
Bill has a comment.
I have several comments.
Bill, several.
In, I think it was 1971 or so, I had an internship in Manhattan. And I wasn't very savvy about how to get around in town. One evening, I left work a little bit late, and it was dark when I was going home. And I got up out of the subway and looked around, and my God, everybody was black. And then I saw 125th Street. I was in Harlem and I didn't know where to go. And so I started walking on 125th Street and said, I've got to get some help here. So I just randomly, nobody was noticing me. It was still, I wasn't there. And I asked somebody on the street, how do I get to where I'm going to go? And he very casually told me, you just keep walking on the 125th and you'll get there. And I did get there. Then I remember a time at the YMCA in Frankfort, Kentucky, where we lived for 23 years, and working out at the Y and showering with a group of men who were also working out at that time. And everybody was white except for one black man. And nobody spoke to the black man. But I noticed something curious about the way he took care of himself. He would sling a towel over his back and rub his back with his towel. And so I just said to him, you look like you've got that moved down pretty well. And from that point on, we were friends. Every time I saw him, we spoke. And then just recently, Sally and I were at a restaurant close to the interstate with our son and waiting for our food to come. And I noticed this black gentleman over at another table, and he was sitting there by himself and nothing was happening. And I thought, they're ignoring him. Well, that was a stupid statement, stupid thought. That he was waiting for the rest of his party to get there, but I didn't know that. So I was gonna speak to one of the waitresses, and I didn't do it, thank goodness. And then his party got there, and immediately he was taken care of. But I thought that was pretty funny. So I walked over to him as we were leaving, and I told him that I had been trying to look out for him and felt pretty stupid when I saw what happened. And his eyes lit up, and suddenly we were interacting and we were respecting one another. Cool. So I think we can easily break through racial prejudice simply by acknowledging the presence of another person and speaking to them as you would to a white. It leads to some beautiful interactions.
Very cool. Thank you, Bill.
Mm-hmm.
So do you all think that the work is really easy? Or do you think, how do you think we're doing as a Baha'i community? Is it something that people who aren't Baha'is, who are like investigating the faith and say, oh, I want that. I want what they have.
Well, Sally and I have really benefited. First of all, our first Baha'i community, we lived in a small town, and the black folks, of course, were segregated, but they were right down the street. And it was so easy to establish relationships with the black churches and with the black employees of the state capitol where I worked, and they lived down the street.
And with the children.
And with the children, yeah, it was easy. And then we moved eventually here to the Atlanta area and started going to South DeKalb Center. And I thought I knew how to interact very casually with blacks and whites, but I had some things to learn there. And I would say one thing about white folks or black folks or anybody: if you feel uneasy in a group of people because you're different or something's bothering you, you're liable to say the wrong thing. And I have done that at South Cab. I did that. I hope I don't do that anymore. But what I'm saying here, I think, is we have to have sympathy, black to white and white to black, that sometimes people are going to say the wrong thing. And so we need to help one another along when we do say the wrong thing or look the wrong way. This is a mutual empathy. That's what we need.
Cool, cool, cool. That's a great point.
Go ahead.
And along that line, I feel that the Baha'i Unity Center, the people there, they were loving and they taught me so many lessons that I'm so grateful for. And they were patient when I screwed up, and they didn't walk away. They came back and said, here's what happened. And do you realize what happened? And in this, our interchange, I walked away. One woman said, I walked away and I made up my mind I was just going to shut you out of my life. And then later she said she came back and she said she realized that that wouldn't do me any good at all. I just keep on doing the wrong thing. And it was her gift to let me know what I'd done. And other people, if you listen, they will tell you. Or if you, say, I'm sorry, what happened here? But I learned so many things, and it just helped so much. But it was, I am just indebted forever to people who had the patience to tell me when I goofed. So
Yeah, thanks for that. And I'm just thinking, all the way back to Baha'u'llah through Abdul Baha Shoghi Effendi, House of Justice and National. It's pretty clear that what we're involved in is reconstructing social order. Talking about a new world order, but Martin Luther King Jr.'s words were also about reconstructing. A lot of activists, anti-racism activists, are talking about reconstructing. So we're not about repairing or reforming the system. We're about creating something new that's based on spiritual principle, the principle of the oneness of humanity. But having said that, what I want to say that all of these examples of working on individual cross-racial relationships and developing our understanding of the oneness of humanity on the ground, in the trenches, so to speak. This is all part of that bigger picture of rebuilding society, reconstructing, eventually building the kingdom of God on earth. And this just really, for me, it puts the work, it makes the work so special, and I think that I always have to remember that, So I just wanted to throw that out there, that it's not just about a personal experience. All these personal experiences have an impact on the bigger development that's taking place. So it helps us relate to something bigger than just us, Yeah.
Tintin, unmute. Unmute. We still don't hear you.
Oops. Oh.
We're lost.
Right. Cool.
no, we can't hear.
You all hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, I just want to quickly share this because we're talking about what can we do as individual or as systematic change, structure change. I just want to share my experience because my field is education psychology and positive psychology. I always start my course with this quote. This is from Baha'i, and also because before we were located in China, we received the advice that we can still teach the Baha'i ideas, the concepts, but without mentioning the names, because the Chinese government is very sensitive about teaching the faith, basically. So you can see, I just always put a quote there, like, the great being says, regarding me as mind rich in germs of investable value, education can alone cause to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit from. And then try to emphasize to my students that regardless their skin color and their language and culture background, we are all has this, like, the value, the gem inside us. So one point is like, we not only we needed to just see them, just to recognize their existence, we also need to believe they have this value, this like gem inside them. I also created this little video and then put the quote there, and just really remind my students that we just have to believe it. Each person is like beautiful, just like this gem here. And then that's all I want to share. Maybe just, maybe we can all in our profession or our daily interaction, just, share this little concept with people.
Yeah.
So that's all I want to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That's
Sure.
wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah. So, yeah. So that's all. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, so let's say you're in a, let's be real here. Let's say you're in a Baha'i community and maybe you're in the LSA meeting or just a conversation after feast or something. And so somebody calls you out for being racist. That happens, right? We've had that experience. I know I've had it. Sometimes it's a little more obvious, sometimes a little more subtle. How does that work? How do we see the gem of inestimable value in the person who's calling us out for being a racist? I think that's something, we don't really have to like break that down here in this gathering today, but I think that's something that's really important to work on as Baha'is in our community building efforts, in our efforts to reconstruct our relationships and our communities, build that new type of system. That is not easy work because we're embarrassed. We might feel, if you're white, you might feel guilt or shame or something. You might feel like you're not going to talk anymore. Something like this. They're kind of typical responses for us who are white, in those situations. But I'm just mentioning that because I'm so grateful that you brought that up, seeing the gems of inestimable value, because that's what that story I read was all about. What prevents us from seeing those gems, and what prevents us from really continuing to see those gems when the person in which those gems are buried is calling us out for being racist or insensitive or whatever.
I think that's kind of what, please mute if you're not speaking. I think that was what Sally was sharing, this encounter that she had with this woman who she had to, her heart had to be open enough to even hear what this woman had to say, and then, move forward along the same path that she was on in the eyes of Baha'u'llah, with a slightly new perspective now. But hearts have to be open in order for that particular vision to be seen, because it's not with the eyes, it's always with the heart. Right. So I think that's what happened there. I also wanted to share very briefly A little story from a Baha'i friend, a white couple who just recently were at a restaurant having a meal, and right next to them or very close to them was this interracial couple and their two kids. And they noticed that the adult female was wearing a Nike shirt with a big, Nike swoosh on it. And this Baha'i couple was a little proactive and started up a conversation about that, about the Nike swoosh, but referred to the Baha'i pin from the 80s or 90s, whenever that was, racism, just undo it, because the shirt said, just undo it. And struck up a conversation, shared the fact that their daughter and son-in-law are also interracial and they're expecting a baby due in December. So established a commonality right there, and then said, I have a pin with that on there. The people, they were surprised to hear about the racism, just undo it. And so when they finished eating and they go out to the car, they're parked next to each other. And he goes in his little bag in the back of the truck and gets this racism, just undo it pin. And they establish some type of bond, they exchange information, all this kind of thing, just over something like that. So it's kind of like Bill being proactive and wanting to see that this person was taken care of and his loneliness dispersed. Or in the other situation where he, spoke up on behalf of this person. We have to take advantage of the opportunities that the House of Justice says are prevalent now. And we just have to do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. Melanie.
Yes, I think it's very valuable to talk about this. But that humble posture of learning that we hear so much about, I think so much of it boils down to that also. As a white person, married to a Black person for 35 years, it always behooves us, as was mentioned, to listen to find out what's going on. And when somebody has a statement that makes you feel uncomfortable, don't look at it as something negative. Look at it as a golden opportunity to be able to improve yourself. Use that humble posture of learning to think about what the situation was and how you could have rectified it or done better the next time.
Such a great point. Thanks so much. When you said that, I saw a lot of heads nodding.
I want to quickly share an experience. It's not about, I guess maybe you can call it maybe inter-racism, because my identity is Chinese American. So I actually feel I am Chinese and I am American. So when the US was really hit very hard by the COVID-19, I felt very sad and I was heartbroken. And then because I was kind of leading a organization and a lot of members are Chinese. So in that group, I was calling for help, donations, say, please help. And, US, it's really hard, please, because back then the mask was very hard. And now I was calling people donating masks, everything. And then I got a woman basically calling me traitor, kind of, calling me names. You should never come back. You betrayed your own country. You are trying to ask for our help for them. So my first reaction was angry, and I feel like I'm doing this from really just care for human being. We are all human beings, brothers and sisters. I'm not thinking that's American or Chinese, but then I realized what is love, and she is doing it. She is attacking me out of love. Her love for her own country, for her own people, so I started to understand that's the problem, because if we only care for my people, my family, my group, and attacking people out of love, that's going to cause the conflict or hatred. So no, my main point is, I think at that point I understood her. She's not a bad person. She's not doing it out of like malicious intention. She's doing it because she thinks she has a noble love for her country, for her people. So maybe I don't know if we can understand it that way. I'm not sure that makes sense, but yeah. So
Yes, it makes sense. Perfect sense, actually. That's a sign of progress and I guess maturity on the road of maturity, on the road to maturity. That's a step forward. I do have to say that it's 12:31 and unfortunately we have to curtail this part of the program. So Jean, I do want to thank you so much for sharing this. I'm sure that the community would like for you to come back at some point in future and share some more information or maybe just even read from another story. That book is just full of awesome accounts of your and Phyllis's wonderful life work. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jean, this morning.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.
I'd like to announce something that is in
Oh,
our.
sure, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So I belong to this group called Meaningful Conversations in Decatur, and it's a national part of a national project. So there are meaningful conversations all over the country. As we get together, we just talk. We have like 9 passages from the Baha'i writings about a particular topic, and so we discuss that. We don't. It's not an opportunity to teach the faith directly. And so a lot of the topics that we've had have to do with race. So we have this kind of like social evening called Tea Time on Wednesday, and the team decided to continue the conversation about race at tea time. So we've already had a couple of tea time meetings where we've continued the conversation. And so this coming Wednesday, I'll be sharing a different story out of the book. It's called Lightning Rod. And it's about going into a museum and talking with an African-American and having a very passionate discussion, which became really dramatic. And it kind of illustrates, it kind of like is an example of some of the stuff that we've touched on today about our communications cross-racially. So I invite you all to come, and if you'd like to be part of that conversation, please put your information, your contact information in the chat, either a phone number where I could text you the link, or email where I could email you the link. And it would be wonderful to have more folks in that discussion.
Thank you, Jean. Again, we really appreciate this stimulating conversation and thoughts about something that we absolutely must do. So we're going to skip the welcoming of the guests. It looks like everybody here is Baha'i already. And we're going to go to the announcements very quickly. Be sure to stop in next week for another outstanding presentation. Details will be forthcoming sometime during the week.
Coming on is Tahereh Adie. She's going to be speaking next Sunday, and her topic is on walking together on the path of service.
Great, thank you for sharing that. You heard Barbara. And please remember that the food distribution program is every Thursday from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Baha'i Unity Center in the parking lot. So please spread the word to help combat food insecurity within the community. And for members of the Baha'i faith, you're warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund, the Sandy Springs Baha'i Fund, and the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system. Or you can mail a check to the Baha'i Unity Center at 2370 Wesley Chapel Road, Decatur, Georgia, 30035. So many thanks to all who worked together to make today's program possible. Our incredible speaker, Jean, our volunteer readers, thank you all, and Barbara Hennix, who keeps us moving forward, the spiritual assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb and Sandy Springs. And thanks to all of you for sharing your day with us. This is my final opportunity to facilitate the Sunday morning devotional program.
No.
After serving 9 months, when it was supposed to be 3 weeks. Starting next week, you'll have a new facilitator to accompany you through. I'll miss this beloved community again, and more than you know, though I'll be returning in a few weeks to share the talk that I gave on forgiveness at the 2020 Pupil of the Eye Conference. I'm Hermione Pickens, and it's been my privilege and honor amongst you, dear friends. Until next time, stay safe and well.
Hermione,
we will
hear me?
We will end with a prayer for the departed.
No, Hermione.
Yes, her 2 cents. Go ahead.
Yes, Hermione, honestly, you know, like she said earlier, she only agreed to do this for 3 weekends, and it wound up being 9 months. So I cannot express to you my gratitude, love, and thanks, really, because this is a hard position to find someone to do, and you did an excellent job. So as you guys hear, we're in search of a new facilitator. I'm trying hard to find it, but it's not coming easy. So
you have to put pressure on Barbara McClendon since she's already done it.
Yeah.
I can volunteer Stephen Boyington.
Awesome. I'll get with him.
That's not called volunteering.
And Hermit, well, I'll get with him. That's wonderful. But there's also another announcement that I wanted to make. The bookstore, even though the Unity Center is not open just yet, but the bookstore is going to start opening up a couple of hours over the weekend, and we are also going online. So everything is online now. And next week, I'll have all that information where people can go online, look at the books, order whatever they want. It can be sent to your house or to the bookstore, wherever. But we're trying to have the Unity Center engage the community as much as possible, even though we can't physically be there. But I'll have that information. And Hermione, it's not going to be the same coming up on Sundays without you.
It's going to be better. You'll see.
Yes, I know. Okay.
Well, that's it. We're going to have a closing prayer for the departed now. Do you have that up, Barbara, or do I need to go to my Baha'i Prayers app?
Yes, you can do that for us.
Okay. I got it here. Okay, this is the short prayer, one of the short prayers. Oh my God, O thou forgiver of sins, bestower of gifts, dispeller of afflictions. Verily I beseech thee to forgive the sins of such as have abandoned the physical garment and have ascended to the spiritual world. O my Lord, purify them from trespasses, dispel their sorrows, and change their darkness into light. Cause them to enter the garden of happiness. Cleanse them with the most pure water, and grant them to behold thy splendors on the loftiest mount. Abdul-Baha.
Aloha, friends.
Aloha.
Thank you, Hermione. Thank you, Jean. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen, I will be reaching out to you.
Thanks to your not so silent partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Aloha.